Hello and welcome everyone to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from women in digital who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughn, and I am the owner and chief empowerment officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share their power, knowledge, and connections. You can learn more about us at www.togetherindigital.com. And this week, I am really excited to introduce and maybe reintroduce to some of our members and listeners to Katie Mcbradley. Katie is someone who, and I love your bio. I'm just going to start talking before I even start reading. I just find it written in the way, like it's so conversational and it's so honest. Katie never really fit in with a career path, including marketing roles at a world-recognized zoo, higher education, indie films, and all kinds of tech. They found their own trail in 2020 to help others have the tools and the connections to build a more fulfilling life. A maker and a brand builder by profession, Katie is also a strategist, a writer, an artist obsessed with disrupting the status quo. Her love language, book recommendations, and Muppet references. Katie, I just don't feel like you just do such a nice job. So our last episode was talking about, do you need a personality brand? And Danielle McHughes, who's also a member, specializes in helping people build and create their personality brands. And I feel like you're like a perfect case study of personality brand, because it's like everything that you kind of touch and do definitely just comes through as authentic and as you. So
Thank you.
Good for you. I feel like everything we learned from last week, I'm like, oh, that's what Danielle was talking about.
I'm glad I figured it out after all this time, but not without my own healthy dose of trial and error.
Right? No, 100%. I absolutely agree. I feel like that's the case for most of us. We feel like we have to get it right the first time, but the beauty and the truth of the matter is we have to kind of gain a few scars and go through a few things before we actually figure out like what makes us authentic and to really embrace it and appreciate it. Your career path in particular, we share some similarities, but yours has been very interesting. Can you share your experience outside of what we read through in your bio, the things that led up to you becoming the founder of OwnTrail and what inspired you to create it? And obviously within that, maybe give us a little bit for those who aren't familiar with OwnTrail, what that is.
Yeah, I never thought I would be a co-founder of a tech company. When I graduated college with a degree in journalism and mass communication, and I literally didn't know it was an option or a possibility. It just was not even on my radar. And I'm also so glad that my career path wound me to here through lots of various detours and rest stops and adventures. And so I graduated with that degree thinking, I love storytelling. I'm going to do broadcast news. And very quickly, one semester in, I realized that I did not want to have people tell me how I could look, I did not want to have to run a haircut past an executive to be the kind of storyteller I wanted to be. So I was thinking I'd be a reporter and edit and shoot stories and do the whole thing. And I was like, oh, wait, somebody's going to tell me what I can do with my own self.
Right.
This is not going to be for me. So from that, actually found my way into a marketing career post-college, where my first job out of college was at the Omaha Zoo, which is amazing. Yay. All of the folks going through the Midwest, you must make a stop. But doing all kinds of things there and not knowing that I was an expert generalist at the time. Which is a word that gets a bad rap. I think of myself as multidisciplinary and a multi-hyphenate versus a generalist. And so I really just followed curiosity and opportunity from there. So from the zoo, I realized that I was getting nonprofit burnout. I loved the work, I loved the mission, but the pay was abysmal, the hours were long. There was just no room for me to grow. I had grown out of my role. And so then I worked at a higher education system, working in a community college system, right when social media as we know it was being born. And that was my first foray into really specializing in a digital world that we all, especially this group, live and work in. From there, I went and spent 6 years at a digital agency. This was the height of the microsite era. Everybody was building things in Flash. The big agencies didn't have digital teams. And that's what the company I was a part of did. And I climbed the ranks there. I started as a copywriter, as a return to my creative side. And by the end of my time there, I was the general manager and vice president of our LA office. So not only did following this curiosity and these opportunities and trying new things and saying, yeah, I can figure that out. It didn't just take me to different industries, it took me to different locations. And from there, I decided I wanted to go back in-house. And the agency life, again, burnout is a recurrent thread, y'all. Agency life, I just needed a break from it and wanted to go in-house and really own helping shape brands and stories using technology. And from then went to an e-commerce company and then really got started about 8 years ago in my early stage startup life. And that's how the possibility to co-found OwnTrail started. I met my co-founder at a networking event back when those were a thing in Seattle, where I lived at the time, for a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, and had a little event. And I found she was really interesting. She introduced herself authentically. So it's kind of full circle there with how you started this. My co-founder, Rebecca, said, I'm all these things. I'm a writer. I'm a vice president at Zillow. I'm an aerial acrobat. I'm a mom. And I said, I need to be her friend. And that's really where our partnership on OwnTrail started. And what we're building is a safe space on the internet that provides tools and space for people to really blaze their own trail. And that started with our signature feature, which is the Trail Creator, which I encourage everybody to play around with, where you visually map out your personal and professional experiences side by side to get this holistic view of your life. And I realized that's something that I had always struggled with, because in telling my story or my career path, I didn't fit into a box. And so I needed more space to do that. And now that's what I'm doing, is spending my time and blood, sweat, and tears making that so we can all have it.
That's so awesome. I hope some people can relate to your story. I think there's a lot of truth. I think there's always that fear of change and moving and trying something different. But the beauty of our discipline in digital marketing, advertising, even technology, is like so much of what we do. While it can be highly specialized, at the same time, there's just so much opportunity to gain and grow constantly new skills. And I also love the fact, and I think that's why we've always hit it off so well, is because one, both copywriters. Two, I really wished I could have worked at the zoo, but my mom would never let me. She's like, I'm not driving you 45 minutes there and back to scoop poop. I'm like, but mom. So I'm not a zoologist, but I did become a creative, and I was always very interested in ops. So your journey from creative into general manager, it happens more often than people will give credit to. And I just love it, because you're one more person that proves an old boss of mine wrong that once told me creatives can't run companies. And here we both
best when you can prove somebody wrong and you're like,
a bit, yeah.
It's a good feeling. That's a good feeling, to be in the right for something in your gut. And I think that's something that I pushed back on. I wish I had pushed back on earlier. I did internally, but this idea that like, you're creative, oh no, you're just a writer, oh no, you're just a project manager, or no, you're just this, and this boxing in that in this field, in this space that is like expanding so rapidly. We have to be able to move out of the boxes to do the best work. But also, it's probably what drew a lot of us to it, is the fact that we like a lot of things and are good at a lot of things. And oftentimes I feel like with gender layered on top of it, that, I don't know, that instinct, that socialization to box us in gets us to play safer rather than getting more comfortable with the change and saying like, this change is space for me to shine and for me to grow. And if I don't like it, or if I'm not good at it, there's 8,000 new things that just got invented yesterday that I can move to next.
Right. Exactly. I think that leads nicely too into the next kind of question, but first I want to second Katie's call for you all to go check out the OwnTrail website. It's www.owntrail.com. You can create your own trail, and there what I love is what you see is like it's not a linear straight line. It's not like just a straight ascending. It's kind of a twisting and a turning. I think there's a lot obviously that we need to, and we're going to talk about it today, just breaking down the idea of what a career path is. And then also the fact that career path also kind of tends to imply for some folks that the way is clear, which we know that's, far from true, especially for women and minorities and people of different socioeconomic classes. The list goes on and on. What roadblocks specifically, going off our title for today's talk, does the status bro present?
Ooh, I don't even know where to start with that one. I'll start with one that I mentioned already, which is burnout, which I think is a recurrent theme that I found in my career path that comes from being adaptable and resilient and multi-passionate, right? So I do a lot of things and I say yes. And sometimes I should be saying no. Sometimes I need to be protecting my time and energy. And sometimes I need to recognize when a culture isn't a right fit for me and it becomes more of a take than a give and take. And so I think that that's been an ongoing relationship versus an obstacle that I would say is recognizing how to manage that within myself and get better at preventing or addressing and also building a company where we're not building a burnout culture. We're not succumbing to hustle culture. And I think that started even early on when I was a nonprofit, and it's not exclusive to digital. That's one of them. And I think another obstacle was, in a sense, not being technical in a technical field. Except that was my own label of it versus other people. I'm sure there are people at some point in time who are like, oh, you're not an engineer. You're not the technical person.
Well, I mean, you walk down the kids' toy aisle and what are you going to see? It drives me nuts. At Target, it could not be any more polarizing gender-wise, which is crazy because Target actually does a lot for the LGBTQIA community. And yet their toy aisles infuriate me because you walk down and it's nothing but dolls, dolls, dolls and girly toys, quote unquote girly toys. And same thing with the boys. It's like action figures. And then it is maybe some more STEM type stuff. I mean, I'm sure that there's bits and pieces of things that are more gender neutral, but yeah, we've been told from a very young age, I feel like especially our generation, that we're not technical. So I don't claim that bias as your own.
Right. But it's me saying
I'm not from childhood.
Right? Well, and think about it. I mean, we all work in tech now.
Right?
We're working in this field. We are all technical. Our role to it is different and our skill set within it varies. But just because you're not building the software does not mean that you're not technical. My whole career, I've been fluent in the language to communicate with designers, with C-suite executives, and with software engineers and people who code. That makes me hella technical. But I think getting through that kind of self-imposed label and also the labels that others put on me for that was a journey. And then I think even going back to the beginning, I'm the first woman in my family to graduate college. And my dad graduated college. I remember him doing night school and doing homework at the kitchen table and me being the annoying little 4-year-old being like, what you doing? What you doing? Can you read that to me? But going through it the first time myself and having to navigate, what's a FAFSA? Should I take out student loans? All of that, I think even though the privilege that I hold as a white person in this world, that did present sets of obstacles to me that I wasn't as prepared for as my peers. And so I think in hindsight has been really great to look at the perspective and how I've grown in that and to realize that you can't judge a book by their cover. You can't assume somebody's lived experiences just by looking at them. And I do think as a startup founder, people assume I went to some prestigious Ivy League place or that I came from, a technical family. My dad was an engineer. He drove trains. The OG engineer.
Cool. Right.
But I mean, it's like that those obstacles, that assumptions, obligations, and expectations put on us have been pretty much the source of most of my career obstacles, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. We've got another guest coming on here in a few weeks. Aparna Ray, she owns Moving Beyond. I should connect you to Katie at some point. She's amazing. She had sent a newsletter that it just came into my inbox and just was like an arrow straight to my heart.
Ooh, I love
and
those.
I emailed her right away and I was like, we have to have you back on to talk about this. And it was talking about meritocracy and the fact that, you know, I was sitting there getting ready to write our member newsletter, and I'm wondering, what do I write to these women that are so extremely burnt out, tired, and angry? Like, there's nothing I can say to make any of our situations right now better, because the mess of the world that we're kind of in right now. And I read her note on meritocracy and how this notion of if we just work harder, we'll overcome. And it's just complete and utter bullshit. And so, not to be like a total pessimist, but it's like, yeah, hard work can pay off for some people, but if you don't have the cards stacked in your favor, you might not ever. And so there's this kind of I'm really big into mindfulness too. And so, you know, this idea of non-attachment to outcome has been such a gift as a mindset. So if you're struggling with this notion of hustle and just I have to work harder and that's how I'll get through, because again, I do think that has been kind of an idea and a condition set by, you know, a male dominated work environment where everybody, when they were going to work, it was all, you know, mostly white men working blue collar jobs. And now we're all the blue collar economy, and we're very different in the way that we look and where we came from. Like, we're not there with diversity yet, but it's getting better. But this mindset still lives that we have to hustle harder to get farther. And it's like, no, we don't. Actually, sometimes it's about working smarter. It's about who you know. It's about timing. So many other things come into the mix, and sort of, you know, leveraging some mindfulness tools have kind of helped me overcome and negotiate the love of living through, you know, these times and burnout, because I mean, I think we're even tired of hearing we're burnout from burnout.
A bit, right?
On top of it. I
love Aparna's newsletter also. Like, our paths crossed when I lived in Seattle, and she's phenomenal. So when you said she's coming on next, I was like, mark my calendar. But yeah, it's this thing that, like, yes, there are obstacles that we have that face us in our individual lives, but there's also so much systemic shit that we all, you know, my friend Nikki Innocent said to me the other day, she's like, you're walking around carrying someone else's baggages, and you're like, this isn't my luggage. I'm not even going on that trip. And it's true. And I do think that I love what you shared about releasing attachment to outcome, because we're in such an outcome oriented culture, but also specifically within this digital discipline, it's so outcome oriented. And so it's hard sometimes to realize like how deeply those roots have settled into us. It's kind of like if anybody gets like those house plants or things, it's like getting fungal gnats, which I'm currently battling in my house because I clearly don't know how to take care of houseplants. But it's like they're insidious because you didn't notice that they got into everything. And at first you're just like batting them around. You're like, this is just annoying. And then you're like, no, it actually becomes a time and energy suck. I'm here Googling nematodes when I could be doing something else. And that's what a lot of these systemic problems are, right?
That's such a great analogy.
They creep in and they gnaw at our roots.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Let's talk a little bit too about, you know, when we're talking career path, there's two other big topics that do not align with the status quo for women, especially. And that is motherhood, middle age, and menopause. I'm putting those two things together. Do you have any thoughts, viewpoints on sort of how those impact the idea of career path?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely the mommy tax and the expectations, and even the microaggressions and the differences that come not just from men in the workplace when a mother has a child, or you know, not just the gives birth and returns to the workforce, but when a mother is present at work, it also comes from other women and people who are of all genders, everywhere on the gender spectrum. We're so indoctrinated with mom has to do it all.
Yeah.
How does she do it? You must be tired. You must be fulfilled. And all these kind of assumptions that I think that people make about a mother's journey, a working mom's journey, that I think oftentimes aren't necessarily fair to just project onto somebody's experience. Like, yes, hell yes, a lot of us are tired. Hell yes, a lot of us are trying to do it all. But ask, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that there's this idea that it's just men who perpetuate those stereotypes isn't true. There's a lot of us who have internalized misogyny, who have internalized gender binaries and internalized gender stereotypes. And I'd say for me, it was more hurtful and harmful when it came from women.
Oh, yeah.
And even more hurtful and harmful when it came from moms. Because I was like, dude, you know this. We're on the same ride at Disney World here. Like, come on. And so I think that that's something that I look to be aware of and constantly working on myself and saying, how am I holding space for somebody to share their journey instead of me assuming the role that parenthood has in their life. Right. But at the same time, it's the inequities of being a working mom are very different and are very real. And that part sucks. And then I think that I love that you brought up middle age and menopause.
Yeah.
So like motherhood deserves to be talking about. Working motherhood absolutely deserves all the headlines and books and all of the things that it gets. But nobody talks about middle age and menopause, like at nearly the same amount of volume. And for me, as I turn 40 in a few weeks, and I think about how I'm kind of loving approaching middle age in a sense, and not just coming into my own and feeling more comfortable in my skin, but because of like, again, like the patriarchal heteronormative world we live in, like I kind of like being a bit more invisible when it comes to desirability. Like, great, I don't have to, I don't feel like I have to have my guard up as much, which is also a weird experience, right? To be like, oh wait, I'm not the hot young thing anymore, but also maybe I'm safer. So just some random thoughts there.
Yeah, I agree. We do talk about it a lot with Together Digital, and I think we've had a few episodes where we've definitely touched pretty hard on the topic because, motherhood often is a life choice, not always, but often a life choice. And so there's obviously many of us who choose never to become moms, but middle age kind of comes for us all, no matter what, assuming we are blessed enough to make it there. And I think just I have loved over the last few years getting the chance to speak with more middle-aged women or postmenopausal women about it because it's just so eye-opening. So I love to bring it up and I love to talk about it because it impacts us so differently. And it's so much more than just frigging hot flashes. It really, like the changing levels of hormone in your body affect like your memory, your perception, your ability to sleep, or your sense of fatigue. You think you're losing your mind, but in fact, you're just going through a big change. And what's on the other side of that for a lot of women that I've talked to is sort of feeling like your prepubescent self, where you are just so like, you have energy, you're not driven by a bunch of hormones anymore. It used to be like with your cycle, the ups and the downs. Now let's talk about men for a minute. They're up there and being driven by testosterone all the time. So they're saying we're being driven by hormones. We have some ups and downs throughout the month, but guys, you're up here all the time. And so to kind of have that sort of clean slate, they find very refreshing and very liberating, but then they come up against the fact that now, like you said, they feel and they seem invisible. Women who are older are not valued the same way that older men are valued. And so when you're trying to make a career change or looking for a job, it's so much harder when you're a middle-aged woman because people just will look at you and treat you differently because we do not value our elders. And I'll say that for both genders. I mean, definitely men in the professional world, they get that gray, they get that seniority, and people see them as something more still. But that's in certain roles and certain kind of situations. That's not for every man, even. So
I think that there's this idea, especially like in career, when you are a middle-aged or older woman, and there's this idea that, or this perception, assumption that we're not still growing and changing and learning and expanding in our skills and things like that. It's kind of like this assumption that like we're peaked and we're staying here, and that's like we're fixed in our personalities and what we can offer. And that's absolutely not true. And I think that the parallel between those three M's, right? The motherhood, middle age, and menopause is that they are absolutely powerful times of transformation and absolutely hugely personal and individual powers, right? There's the transformation to build life, to take care of life, however your route to parenthood is. And then the changes of coming into middle age and then menopause, like the status quo, which is a term I use to kind of broadly umbrella describe all of the systems and status quo of it all that doesn't serve most people. Of course, they want to downplay that power. Of course, they don't want to talk about it. Of course, they don't want to recognize the power that is a 50-year-old with decades of experience and perspectives and skills and counting. It benefits them to discount that because it protects their space and their power. And I love that you're bringing it up here openly and honestly and throughout, not as a standoff, one-off topic, right? Because I think it's often a box to tick, like, oh, well, we did our moms at work episode, or, oh, we did our talking about middle age, check. And it's not. Each of those topics is so rich and so robust, and everything from getting into the science of it, right? Like you tipped a bit on just like the hormonal science, but like the brain chemistry, the sociological impacts, like it's huge.
It is.
I'm here for more conversations about it, and here for more people recognizing and stepping in and claiming that power that they're in, especially when feeling invisible is, yes, it can be good to get the attention off of you when you want to be out of the spotlight. But claim it when it's yours, like step into it.
I agree. I'm going to be, I say it was a privilege, but it was to work at a nursing home. And I think it was the summer after my senior year of high school. And it gave me so much perspective and respect for my elders and for what it meant to embrace aging. And I'm just going to be, the older I get, the less fucks I'm going to give and the more obnoxious I'm going to be because I can. It's one of those things where it's like, you've lived your life, you've had experience, you know what's right for you. There's this, I remember also reading once in a magazine that like, when I've been looking forward to 40 since I was 20 and I'm 41 now. And I just remember reading this headline when I was in my 20s, it said that the 40s, it was their age of knowing, where you finally start to kind of see the systems, the world around you, because you have that experience. You're looking at other women who are kind of going and growing through these things that you went through. And all of a sudden, all this stuff starts to become clear. And in the meantime, you kind of just care less about what everybody thinks. And I love that. I remember when I also offered to do some coaching for free for women on LinkedIn. And I think like I offered 10 like 20-minute sessions, and half of them were women over 40 and closer to 50 and or above. And one of them started off our phone call with, well, as you can tell, I'm older in age. And I was like, stop right now. What? Number one, please don't tell me that, because she was interviewing and looking for work. I said, please tell me that you don't start interview conversations this way. I was like, you, first of all, I mean, looking at you, I couldn't guess your age right now, and I wouldn't even try to. That wasn't even the first thought that came into my mind. So I think sometimes too, again, as we talked about before with this notion of the status quo, like even the lens that you put on yourself, how much of that is truly you seeing you as you, or you seeing yourself the way that you think the world is seeing you, So I don't know. Yeah, I am a huge fan of talking about middle age and menopause and what it means to be an aging woman, especially in this country and in this industry. But we'll get on to the next question, because this one could go.
Okay. I know. I feel like we could do a whole series just about that, you and I.
We could. All right. Why should one make more room in their career path than just career? Because I want to preface this really quickly. When you guys go onto OwnTrail and start to create that, you're going to see all kinds of cool little life stages, changes, and events where you can place those on your career path. So one, why did you guys do that? And why should we make more room for just more than career within our path?
Well, so I like to think about it first from like how we're used to telling our career stories, right? We're used to our resume or our LinkedIn mostly, right? If we want to document it. And then there's also how we do our bios and we introduce ourselves and all of those. And those are meant to serve specific objectives, right? Your resume's objective, it's a selling document, right? You're saying these are the skills and the experiences I'm offering you in return for money. Like at its simplest form, a resume is a selling document to get you hired, to be compensated for your labor. LinkedIn, very similar. That's what it originated at. Yes, other things happen on LinkedIn now, to better or worse outcomes, right? But when we look at our career path and the journey of it, it isn't a selling document, right? If that's not the intention, and if the objective is actually to understand and value our journey, we need to have space to look at all the things that influenced it. And parenthood is a great example, right? How parenthood affects your career, regardless of your gender, regardless of if you stay in the workforce full time or not. It has an impact because it shapes who you are. And there's lots of those things in our life that either maybe it's a skill that we got really good at. Maybe you're the oldest of 14. So like wrangling teams has been something you've done your whole life, right? And you bring that to your work. And there are things that we learn in our professional life that we can apply to our personal life. We as humans don't exist with skills, knowledge, and perspectives that we only apply in one place. Like, yes, you might mostly use your Excel pivot table skills at work, but you could apply it to a problem that you're solving at home.
Oh, yeah.
And so by allowing space for that fluidity, we can see what's meaningful to us instead of ticking boxes to meet qualifications. So it's really a different reframing. To have a different way of reframing how we tell ourselves and others our stories, we had to build different tools. And we've been asked oftentimes like, oh, I wish it would be so great if I could just import all of my info from LinkedIn. And side note, yes, we are working on easier like ways to incorporate different pieces from places, especially for people who are busy and maybe just aren't words people. But at the same time, we're not trying to recreate LinkedIn. We want you to think about, okay, did this job mean something to you? Or was it at the time, it was just a job, you learned some stuff, you moved on, but was it really meaningful? And so in getting us to think differently about our experiences in the workforce and our careers, we have to hold space and literally have tools to make space to talk about the things outside of quote unquote the office.
Yeah.
How the pandemic has affected people in looking at their careers, not just the differences of going to work during COVID, but saying life is short. We never know what's going to happen. I did not have global pandemic on my bingo card.
Right.
That's been an eye-opening space. And that's not something, yes, a lot of those realizations manifest in changes in your career, maybe changing industries, maybe pushing for that promotion and more responsibility. But most of the things that actually drive our career choices are driven by our more overall life decisions and our internal shifts. So we just felt like, I don't know, I guess I kind of felt like it was obvious at the time that like we had to have space to connect those dots, that we're working to make money for a life we want in something that we enjoy. Those are intrinsically about fulfillment, but we're not connecting those dots in most places.
No, and it's just a more comprehensive story to share with people when you include life outside of career in your resume, in your career path, and even in the story that you tell or share about yourself when they ask that wonderful question at the opening of every interview. So tell us about yourself. You know, there's an opportunity.
I hate that question. Amy, can we burn that question with fire?
I have requested it. We can start a petition, maybe. It is one of those things, that one, tell us about yourself. And then there was one other one, I think towards the end, we talked about this in another past episode as well, when we were talking about interviewing And yeah, there are just some questions that, oh, what is your biggest weakness? That is also one thing that it's like, come
Nope.
on. Like, again,
So,
this is checking for your self-awareness. I understand. But also
but
it
it's in
just
a,
feels like a trap.
you're in a position of salesman, of like
Right.
selling, right? So like, you're not going to be like, well, my worst or my biggest weakness is that I always tell my partner that I'm going to fold the laundry, but I forget to do it and I leave it there
Right.
for weeks. Like nobody's going to say that because it's not relevant. It's not like selling. Oh my gosh. And it's funny. I hate those fluff, but it's
Yeah.
feeling those questions that feel like they're necessary, but they don't give you any information. And so
Yeah.
we've actually kind of unofficially banned them from
Yeah.
OwnTrail
Yeah.
things. And our usual go-to, the opener that I've come up with, because I also don't like it when people only introduce themselves as what they do for a living.
Yeah.
We are more than our jobs.
Yeah.
We are so much more than our resumes. We are full people, regardless of if we're sitting at our laptop or out, I don't know, running through the park.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of saying like, oh, give us a little bit about yourself, tell us what you do, because we default to going to our roles,
Yeah.
our job, our relationships to other, a
Mm-hmm.
parent, a partner, whatever. So I ask folks, who and how are you today?
Yeah.
And those two things together gives a space. You can say what you do for work,
Mm-hmm.
or you can just say like, I am a human who is just like floundering in the mess of all of it, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
That's to me a much richer intro
Mm-hmm.
than saying like, I'm a marketing manager at a mid-sized insurance company.
Right. Right.
I know nothing about you then.
Mm-hmm. It's so inhuman, and it doesn't give way to help reveal the intersectionality of who you are as well, which is another thing I love, is that when people open up and are vulnerable about who they truly are at their core, not just what they do, you are giving permission for others to, also share, to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
to reveal that intersectionality, to find those uncommon things about each other. And then there's also those things that do connect us, because again, we are humans, we're designed for connection. So if you're always giving your answers or always looking at your career path from that single lens, you're not giving yourself full credit for the human that you are. And that's why I really loved OwnTrail, and I love that you all included that, because our whole life gets shaped by so much more than the jobs that we do. And so kind of bringing up things like marriages or divorces or children, or you even have pregnancy loss in there. I mean, that shapes us, it teaches you how to deal with grief and life, moves to different countries and different cities. It really adds to the complexity of your experiences and just shows how multidimensional you are as a human being. And to me, I don't want to work for somebody that doesn't find that attractive. If they look at that and they're like, oh, this is too much personal information for us, or we don't really care that Amy hasn't eaten meat in 20 years, I'll be like, well, then maybe you don't care about me. And I don't want to work for somebody who doesn't really care about me.
Yes. And also like, it's all about agency too, right? Like you get to choose what's on there versus like having preset fields. And so that's always super important, especially when we think about anybody who's part of a historically oppressed group, is this whole thing about bring your full self to work. Yeah. I always, like, if I ever say that, I say it with like the biggest asterisk ever, because it needs to be safe and it needs to be your choice. Because like you bringing up not eating meat, like that's your story to tell, and it shouldn't be a prerequisite.
Yeah.
And knowing that there are some situations where like that is a great thing for people to know, and to get to know you and deepens the connection. And maybe there's a coworker and they're like, oh, I knew we had shared work, experience overlap, but oh my gosh, we can, like, it deepens this connection and allows us to see each other more richly, while also providing a way to keep ourselves safe in a world that isn't often safe for so many people. Exactly. And I think that's key of it, right? It's like you should be able to bring your authentic self and be valued for your authentic self, and not just what you produce. Right. So back to what you said about letting go of the outcome, it's shifting our own mindsets too, that we are worth more than just what we produce for other people.
Yes.
Like we have value simply because we exist. And I think that that's hard to see sometimes in this really, really busy field and with the culture that we have. And so, my biggest hope is that in some way OwnTrail doesn't just let you see how other people and are living their lives and their combined experiences, but it's just a powerful way for you to see it within yourself. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it's kind of like a Trojan horse. It's like, oh, you're curious and you get to see how other people are making their way through their personal and professional lives. Mm-hmm. But like you said, that gives you permission to be open about your own.
Yeah.
And doing that also allows you to value it, mm-hmm. right? Not just prove it's valuable to others.
Right. Love it. So would you say that you're kind of, well, I don't know. I mean, based on how you answered earlier, would you say that your definition of career path has changed since you started OwnTrail or before you started OwnTrail?
Ooh, I've never thought about it in those terms. I actually think that my definition or my understanding of what my career path would be shifted just slightly before we started the company. It was starting to shift and evolve, and it's actually validated. So starting OwnTrail has validated the path that I was embarking on at the time, where I had decided there's a layoff on my trail. If you see, there's a layoff that was unexpected. Mm-hmm. It came 3 weeks after I had a miscarriage. It was a very interesting month. Oh, and it wasn't performance-based. The company pivoted, et cetera, et cetera. But the way that they handled it left something to be desired. Mm-hmm. And it was at that point in time that I made the conscious decision that I was not going to work for a company like I was a part owner of it again. Mm-hmm. Or work for a company full stop that didn't align with my personal values. Yeah. And really existed just to make a couple people a ton of money and that being the end all be all. Right. And so in doing that, I really looked at thinking of my career path as as one of the ways that I'm serving my life path, right, instead of the other way around. And so for me, when I get asked for a bio or to tell people what I do, I talk about what my life's work is. And that connects to what I do at OwnTrail for a paycheck. Mm-hmm. There are functional, tactical things that I can dig into, but it all is connected to like my broader life's work. Mm-hmm. Instead of thinking like, oh, my career is the only work that I'm on this planet to do. Yeah. So it's really validated that. And not just because of what we're building, and I can't take credit for it, but because of what I've witnessed and shared in the community and with all the people that are on OwnTrail. It's fueled me, which was a wonderful unintended consequence.
Yeah. That is the benefit of doing work like this, isn't it? Like what you give is what you get. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. It's awesome. Yeah, I just wrote down and I put it in the chat too. I love that saying, and I'm totally going to make something for LinkedIn later and quote you on it. You have more value than what you produce for others. I make a habit of keeping little sticky notes with the awesome sayings around my desk every so often to just keep those in my mind as I look around. I feel like that definitely deserves a Post-it note. If y'all have Post-it notes at your desk, ladies, especially, I think we do feel like somehow our productivity equals our value, and it's just not true. It's yet another systematic notion and bias that we have about women in general, that if we're not productive or producing, if we're not having babies, we're just not a woman. Okay. We're not a good woman. It's like, yeah, no. So awesome quote there. Love it. And then there was something else I was going to bring up, but then I just got so distracted by it because I love a good quote.
Well, and something that you helped me put the dots together through this conversation. We talked about when you mentioned that on the other side of, post-menopause, that feeling prepubescent again, made me think of how we, much like we don't as a culture respect or value our elders, we also minimize children. Yeah. And really what the status quo, what patriarchal white capitalism does is it focuses on what's productive, right? Yes. And that's why it's our earning years are really where they focus on making us feel like that's the only time that like we are valuable members of society, right? Because we're contributing to the bottom line. When in reality, like I learn so fucking much from my 3.5-year-old every single day, just like I do from talking to my parents, to talking to the head of my child's school who is older than I am, and really valuing the intergenerational friendships beyond just the workplace and our work roles, I think are a rich area that we can like, it sounds small, but it's one huge way you can challenge the status quo is by welcoming and recognizing the knowledge and the wisdom and the joy in people that aren't in the workforce or a prime earning age. Like, fuck that. Like everybody has value on this planet and we can learn from everyone.
Absolutely.
If we just stop for a quick second and pay attention.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. I remember what the other thing was that I was going to mention is it's another feature of OwnTrail is that you also include aspirational type milestones and things like that, which I love because again, I think when you complete your own trail, which I know you're all going to go away and do here this afternoon or this weekend, is that you kind of look at it and you sit back because I've created mine and I look at it and I'm like, wow, I've done and accomplished so much. I don't think we take enough time to one, acknowledge where we've gone and how far we've gotten despite maybe all of these different like setbacks and changes and life events, but also to add that, you know, element of the future and what we're working towards. And again, I think by the time you start working through your own trail and you're not just adding those professional pin drops, it really makes you look at your life as a whole. And so all of a sudden I realized like when I'm placing goals into my own trail, I'm not just placing work, professional, monetary goals. I'm posting about things like travel or leaving some kind of legacy. And again, like your whole career path, it doesn't have to be your passion. I just love how OwnTrail has made room for, you know, purpose and passion alongside your career. And we did talk about that too in the last episode with Danielle Hughes about a personality brand that, you know, there are ways to kind of tie your passion and your purpose into the work that you're doing. An example is we have a member, Danielle, who's in Columbus and works for a fertility company, and she works on a lot of the tech and marketing back end, but in her profile, she talks about how she is a dog enthusiast. And to me, that just tells me that for what the kind of work that she does, she's just she's an empathetic person. She's a caring person. If she's compassionate towards animals, I would like to assume she's compassionate towards people when they're going through fertility type things. Like you want somebody who's doing the marketing and the messaging that has an understanding of and the element of compassion to what they do. So I do think too, sometimes we think that there's no room for passion and purpose in our career path. I love between that and then the aspirations. I love how OwnTrail just makes room for that.
Thank you. Yeah. And it was when we, as someone who works in words often, when it came to name those, right? Because you can have past, present, and aspirational milestones. We knew we didn't want to call them future because that just isn't fun. But we knew we didn't want to call them goals for a reason. And it's because goals feel like they have to be figured out. They have to be action oriented. Like I love a SMART goal. I love an OKR, like great. Like if the goal is, if objectives, if we need to be in the outcome game, goals, structure, great. But when we're thinking about possibilities for our lives, there's so much more to explore if we give ourselves space. So by even labeling them aspirations, there isn't a level of commitment or obligation that feels like if you put it out there, you have to do it. Otherwise you were wrong or you failed. You can change your mind too. Like my co-founder, Rebecca, started out with an aspiration on her trail to join a corporate board. And then she was like, oh, wait, I don't actually think I want to do that. I'm enjoying building outside of the corporate system. I value people who do that change within, but that's not right for me anymore. And so she had a powerful experience with just the simple act of taking it off of her trail. And I think that that's another way. It's like, give yourself space to dream, to name things, and also to change our damn minds. Like, there's also that stereotype, women are fickle. Nope, we're burning that one with fire too. That is not true. We are humans. We are complex. we change over time. So of course we all change
We are
our minds. So
flexible. We are
right,
malleable and adaptable. Yes.
right. Like, so if you had an aspiration to travel to I don't know, to live in Burma for 6 months, and then you decide that's not the thing you want to focus on, or I don't know, something happens and Burma's no longer on the radar for you. Okay. It hurts absolutely no one to change your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's your own mind to change, damn it.
Yep. Amen. Underline, underscore.
Right. All right. We are coming close to time. I want to make sure that we leave room for questions that any of our listeners have. So you guys can add them to chat. You can come off of mute and speak your question, whatever you all would like. Drop any questions that you have in the chat.
And I thought of something as you're building your trails.
Yeah.
I've got to plug you. You can add, there's lots of different optional profile fields you can add to your trail. Totally optional. You can edit them whenever you want. But there's one called affiliations. And if you're a Together Digital member, you can add that proudly to your trail so other members can find you and can see you, and you can get to know each other better there. But also just so you can proudly show it off.
I love it. I love it. That's so great. Because again, too, then I think you can search people out by associations too. So then you can kind of see if you're in a group, all of our Together Digital paths. And I will say,
all the cool humans that are part of this community. Like I did it before we recorded this podcast. I looked and I just filtered by Together Digital, and I was like, what a cool community.
Yeah, we're very fortunate with this group. And again, like, I love that it's on there because it was a pivotal and career and life-changing thing for me, as many of you know, and maybe some of you don't know. I went from member to CEO to owner. So I wouldn't even be sitting here if it wasn't for this beautiful, amazing community that, you know, we've been working so hard to kind of keep going through these crazy, crazy times. All right. So if I'm going to ask my last question, since we haven't had any other questions pop in and nobody come off of me, but feel free to come off if you guys need to. If you've never given your career path any thought, which I'm guessing everybody that's listening has started to think about it. So say we're just starting, where do you start, Katie? Where do you recommend?
I say start by thinking about the work you enjoy doing, not the work you're good at. Because oftentimes, specifically for women in this field, it's easy to get stuck doing the work that you're good at and having that drive your career path instead of the work that you enjoy doing. Maybe speaking from a bit of experience there.
That's some freaking good advice.
and let that guide you, and let that guide you as you think about what roles you might want, what roles have been valuable for you, and what companies and teams are valuable. I think that's been really key, because the good and bad thing about our field and working in digital is titles can mean everything and they can mean nothing.
Right. That's a whole nother episode too.
Right.
Marketing manager. What does it mean?
Right? And
it depends on where you are.
Yes, exactly. So if you start by really reflecting on the work that you enjoy doing, knowing that we all will have to do some stuff that we don't love, that's just kind of comes with it. Sure. I heard this analogy once that like we all have to eat a shit sandwich. You just get to decide what bread it's on. So choose the bread you like. I
love it.
I was like, wow, that's visceral.
I love a good analogy, even if it makes you cringe a little. It's effective.
It's stuck. Clearly, it'll stick with you. But yeah, focus not what you're good at, what you like, and then build on it from there.
I love it, love it, love it. We will end it with that fantastic idea and advice about disrupting the status quo, focusing on your career, creating a career path that is meant for you, not anybody else, with nobody else's shoulds in there as well. Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. It's always so much fun to just spend time with you and chat. I kind of forget. I think I love having the live audience here, but I kind of just forget. And I feel like it's just you and me chatting. But thank you so much for the work that you're doing and for the way that you're supporting people in their career path and their life path. I think it's just such an inspiring thing. And again, using data visualization and technology to do that, just, love it. Next week, I'm really excited. We have a guest who is going to be, she's the author of We Are Speaking, Life Lessons of Kamala Harris. So join us next week along with Hitha. Let me grab that link for our live audience and drop that in the chat so you can take a listen to that. If you ever
She's incredible.
Yeah, I haven't had the chance. I've only talked to her people so far. I haven't been able to meet her yet. So I'm really excited for next week. I've got a ton of good questions. I've been like listening to other interviews and podcasts that she's been on. And I think what I love about it is she just leans into, I feel like Katie, the same kind of things you and I do, where it's like, you have these like, you find inspiration and awe and empowerment in other women. You don't look at them and go, oh, well, she's got this. You don't compare and you don't compete. You just see them and you're like, okay, and so she's talking a lot about how really after seeing Kamala speak once, it became her North Star in a lot of ways for learning how to make room to be heard. So she has kind of this whole book that's a compilation of not just Kamala's stories, but other women's stories that really talk about and show ways in which they've created internal and external systems to be heard. So tremendous book, check it out. Register via the link if you haven't already registered for next Friday. I did drop the link to Together Digital and OwnTrail in the chat as well. So be sure to check out both our websites. Have a fabulous Friday, everyone. And thank you again, Katie. It was good to hang out with you. I'll see you soon. All right. Bye, everybody.